And it looks like we're live. Hi everyone, my name's Olivier, and this is the Ubuntu Online Summit session on browser convergence. So for those who don't know me, I work at Canonical on the System Apps team, and I'm responsible for the browser application and all sorts of related technologies. So today we're going to talk specifically about convergence. What I want to do is do a quick review of what we've been working on in terms of convergence in the browser since the last Ubuntu Online Summit session that we had 6 months ago. And then I also want to mention briefly what's coming next in terms of convergence. I'd like also to leave some room for questions and requests. The planning, the schedule is not completely set in stone. So if you have requests of what you'd like to see in the browser, this is the right time to ask them. So let me start with what we've been doing in the past cycle. First of all, if anyone wants to join the Hangout to make this a more interactive session, you're welcome. I'm gonna feel less lonely. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and I'll be keeping an eye on the RC channel. It's #ubuntu-uos-convergence in Freenode. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like to mention, any corrections, if I'm saying stupid things, please do not hesitate. I'll be keeping an eye on the RC channel. All right, let's get going. So there are many aspects to convergence. I think I mentioned it 6 months ago when we did this convergence session for the browser. And last time we focused mainly on layout issues. In the past cycle, we've been doing quite some work on layouts as well, and other things that are less visible, but still very important for convergence. So it's no news by now, but many aspects of convergence revolve around screen size and input method rather than an ill-defined form factor notion. We still had a form factor variable being defined in the browser code base all around and used all over the place until recently, and we finally managed to get rid of it. So that's good news. And it was actually a context property of the Ubuntu.web plugin, QML plugin, which incidentally was being used in some applications. It wasn't really intentional. It was more like a result of copy-paste of existing code. But I've worked together with the authors of those applications, and it was entirely removed from all of them. So that allowed me to then remove the actual property from the QML plugin. So some examples of how we replaced this wrong use of a form factor thingy with other heuristics is, for example, the height of the tabs bar. Now it's computed depending on the presence of a touchscreen or not. So if you have a touchscreen, typically you want the target area of the tabs to be higher, or taller, so that it's easier to just select a tab, as opposed to doing that with a mouse, which with a mouse you have a much more fine-grained control. Another situation which is bound to the presence of a touchscreen is whether to auto-hide the Chrome when you scroll down or up on a page. So again, this is now only dependent on a touchscreen. where previously it was computed depending on this form factor thingy, and form factor was basically if we're running on Unity 8, then we're a phone or a tablet, which was true for some time, but it's not anymore. Another thing that was bound to this form factor property is we assumed that on phone or tablets we had a limited amount of memory, and to avoid some out-of-memory situations, which typically prompt the system to kill an app, in that case, kill the browser, which is really not a good experience. What we were doing is we limited the number of live tabs at any given time, and we limited it to 2. That meant that if you open 3 tabs, then the oldest one in the background would be unloaded, which was not really nice, especially when you're on mobile data and you have to reload the tab and it consumes some data. So what we're doing now, we're being much more clever about it. We don't have any hard-coded limit. Instead, when we detect that the system is running low on memory, we start unloading background tabs. But in most cases, that allows many more tabs open than just 2. And by the way, there's been a bug report recently about this system for detecting low memory situations. It's not optimal yet. It's working okay, but it's not optimal yet. So we're working to fine-tune it. Another thing that was relying on the form factor property was whether to echo the last character of a password when entering a password in a text input on a web page. So now this is bound only to the presence of an OSK or not. If you're using a physical keyboard, typically the OSK is not going to show up, and there's no real need to echo the last character of the password, assuming that you're looking at your screen while you're typing. And I think that's mostly it for that form factor property. So it's now gone for good, and that's really good news. That also prompted us to rethink a lot of assumptions that were made throughout the code base for the browser, which is good, and prompted us to remove some dead code as well. Okay, some more good stuff that we did for convergence in this past cycle. We now use the screen size, that is the diagonal of the screen in millimeters, to decide and to set the default user agent string. So the rationale is that a small screen is almost certainly a phone. Of course, in the future, it might not hold true, so we might need to revisit that assumption. But for now, it's I think it's a reasonable assumption. And on large screen tablets, like 10 inches, there is a lot of screen real estate, and most likely people want to see a desktop site on this form factor, even though they're still using the tablet itself without any peripherals, without an external monitor and a keyboard. So that assumption is starting to show its limits already. We've had bugs reported for sites that have a tablet version, including, for example, Gmail. So we're rethinking it. We don't have a definite solution yet. And by the way, suggestions are welcome, because it's a very hairy topic. Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see there was a couple of questions in the IRC channel, so I'm going to interrupt my monologue and see if I can answer them. So question from Michael, what APIs are you using to detect system memory and OSK use? Are these public APIs or does the browser get an exception to use them? So for the system memory, we're basically, we have some custom code that passes /proc/meminfo, which I think is not restricted by AppArmor. So it should be available to all applications, but there's no ready-made QML module for doing that. You're going to have to write some C++ code. And for the OSK, it's a public API. There is in QML there is a Qt global object, and I think there is a Qt.input method object, which refers typically to the OSK on this kind of device. So I hope that answers your questions. And there's a question from someone I can't pronounce the name of. Any plans for Firefox-style add-ons? No script, Ghostery, HTTPS anywhere, etc. I know Chrome has some limits for that, I think. So the web engine for the browser is based on Chromium. It's basically the Chromium Content API that we implement. We don't get all the Chromium's mechanisms for extensions. And we're not planning on adding that. That would be a significant amount of work, and it's not really clear whether it would work on very constrained devices, which I think is the reason why a number of major browsers on mobile don't have extension mechanisms either, including Chrome on Android. So yeah, it's really a non-goal. However, I've been thinking that a few extensions would really make sense and would really improve the user experience. And I was hoping that maybe we could just do the work in Oxide and in the browser to have them enabled by default and not be extensions really, but be part of the main code base. Stuff like ad blocking or NoScript, for example. HTTPS anywhere as well would be really useful. A reader mode in the browser would be very useful as well. So lots of ideas, and it's not really on the roadmap yet, but this is something I'd like to do at some point, or to delegate to someone, to whoever would volunteer for working on that. I actually submitted a Google Summer of Code ID for that, but unfortunately Ubuntu as a mentoring organization was not accepted. So it's not going to be this summer, but who knows, maybe next summer. Question from user 20. Any plans to implement bookmark syncing? This is a feature we would like to see implemented, but there's no firm plan on it, unfortunately. Question again from Michael. How can people who want to implement these get involved with web browser app development? So I guess the easiest way to get involved is just get in touch with me. I'm mostly available on Freenode. If you hit the Ubuntu Touch or Ubuntu Devil or Harsh Oxide channels on Freenode, Oxide is the web engine that powers the browser. I'm hanging around on those channels all day in the European time zone. So just ping me and I can get you started. I can give you pointers, IDs, help. The browser itself, the project for the browser is on Launchpad. So if you go to launchpad.net/webbrowser-app, and you're going to see pointers to the code. It's all open source. So it's all ready for contributions, really. And they are very welcome. Another question, does the browser use U1DB for bookmark storage currently, or something else like local storage? So it's using neither of those. It's using a custom SQLite database, which has a very simple structure. The code is very versatile though, so we could be switching to U1DB if we saw the need or the benefits. It would be easy to replace the backend with any storage backend, really. Yeah, bookmark syncing. Actually, I don't remember why we didn't go with U1DB in the first place. But at the time, there was a good reason. Can't remember it now. But this might be something we want to reconsider if we're going to implement bookmark syncing. Yeah, that's a good point. It probably wasn't working well enough yet at that time. That was quite a while ago. So yeah, definitely something we might want to reconsider. All right, looks like we're done with the questions for now. Don't hesitate to ask more. I'm going to continue with my notes in the meantime. So where was I? Yeah, I think I was talking about, okay, another question. Will it be possible to launch native apps from the browser, like in Android when you try to open a registered protocol? So this is already the case. It's already working. We have two sets of mechanisms for that in the browser. So for protocols, for external protocols like Tel, for example, if you have a phone number in a web page, this is already going to do the right thing and open the dialer app and populates the phone number for you. And this is true for all supported external protocols. So that's all protocols for which an application registers a little bit of code that says, hey, I'm able to handle this protocol. For HTTP and HTTPS, it's always going to open in the browser by default. There's no way to override those protocols. And also, we support the intent protocol, which is an Android-specific thing. But since we're advertising that we have Android-like capabilities in the user agent string, we often get Android-specific web content. And that includes URLs starting with intent : // So in that case, we're trying to infer the corresponding target application, if there's any, in the store, and forward the arguments to that application. Next question, will the browser ever get bookmarklet support? Yes, it will at some point. There is a bug. There is an outstanding bug open for that. And I know that Aquarius, you probably find it in the first place. I did some investigation. I think I commented on the bug. So I think what needs to be done to make it work is understood and known. It's just that it never got to the top of my list. So for this kind of bugs, contributions are very welcome. There's only so much we can do on the team. So yeah, but this is definitely something I'd like to see being done. Any plans to support saving passwords? Yes, I'd like to have that. Actually, I was reading the other day a W3C draft specification for password management integration with the user agent, which sounds very promising, but that's only a draft specification at this point. And in the meantime, it would be nice to integrate, well, to support saving passwords and form data like every modern browser do. There is a bug for that in Oxide, in the web engine. It's a significant amount of work, and it doesn't have a high priority, unfortunately. So we will get to it at some point, but not in the foreseeable future, I'm afraid. Another question, will you offer the Ubuntu browser as a snap from now on? Not right now, but it will become a snap at some point. I know that during this cycle, we're going to do quite some work to move the phone base, the Ubuntu Touch base to Snappy. I don't recall whether it's going to happen entirely this cycle. I mean, if the switch is going to be done this cycle, I think I remember not. But in any case, we're going to do some groundwork to make that happen, and the browser is definitely going to be one of the first apps to migrate to Snap. So stay tuned. Let me read the backlog. Okay, yeah, regarding bookmarklets, it's a design issue. I didn't remember that, but if it is, I think we have, do we have James following the session? James, are you around? So James is the main designer working, UX designer working on the browser and related technologies and applications, among other things. He's a very friendly guy. He's very open to suggestions. So so if you have ideas on how the browser user experience could be improved, please share them with us. A good place, for example, aside from the IRC channels I mentioned earlier, is the Ubuntu-phone mailing list, which I believe is being followed by design as well as development, or just being me, and I'll forward to design. Yeah, as Michael is putting it, a whole lot of work. Welcome. Yeah, as I said, it's we're a small team, and it's mostly me working on the browser. There's occasional contributions from other members of the team and from the community, but it's mostly me, and there's only so much one man can do. Will the browser have separated window for private and non-private modes? Oh yes. So that's actually something I was planning to mention. It's in my notes. So one of the upcoming things for convergence, big things, is multiple windows. Support for that in Unity 8 and Mir just landed. So we're going to use that in the browser. And one of the things that we're going to use it for is definitely separate private tabs in their own window. It really, the private mode as it is today was designed for phones only. And it works well there, but it's not adapted to a desktop form factor. So when you plug your phone onto an external monitor, it really doesn't make sense to have private and public tabs being exclusive things. And this is something I plan to work in the very near future. So stay tuned. It might even be an OTA 12 thing. Next question. Are developer tools out of scope for the Ubuntu browser? I miss being able to view source and inspect elements when doing web dev. It's actually a working feature. It's not really well exposed, but if you run the browser with an extra command line parameter, which I don't remember what it is. Yeah, dash dash inspector. So if you run web browser app dash dash inspector, and you can pass it an optional port number, it defaults to 9221. Then you can access all the Chromium developer tools in a remote browser. So you can so if you have the browser running on your phone, and if you have a desktop running on the same local network, you can fire up Chromium in that desktop, point it to the IP address of your phone, and there you go. You have all the Chromium dev tools. Question: we have talked about before about the idea that each browser tab could show as a separate app in the app switcher on the phone. Is that part of the multi-window support? Well, that would require multi-window support, definitely. I think that's more of a design issue, really. And I haven't heard anything like that from design. If design wants every tab to be a separate window, then it's going to require a significant amount of work in the browser. We're going to need to re-architecture it to support that. This is not something I'm opposed to, but this is definitely something I'm not seeing coming anytime soon, especially because I haven't seen any design for that. Next question. Is there documentation for the developer tools? What you are saying right now? No, there's no documentation for that. That's not good. Oh, Dacre wrote a blog post about it a year ago or so. Awesome. So yes, we have documentation for it. All right, another question. Keep them coming. That's really good. Does the user agent of the browser change when you put the browser in the sidebar? Some websites load the mobile site after some time, some don't. No, the user agent is currently based only on the screen size. It doesn't take into account the window size, for the reasons I mentioned earlier. So it's not going to change the user agent. One would hope that in 2016, websites don't rely on the user agent any longer for serving the right content, but it's not the case. We know for a fact that websites do rely on the user agent, and they do all sorts of wrong assumptions, unfortunately. So we have to learn to live with that. And that's the reason why we have an like Android token in our user agent. Otherwise, most websites wouldn't serve us mobile content, which really sucks, but that's how it is. Yeah, among those wrong assumptions, there is the widely spread assumption that a phone is either Android or iPhone and nothing else. So if you're not Android or not an iPhone or not pretending to be one, then most likely you're not going to get mobile content. That sucks. They also, a lot of websites assume that a desktop form factor or desktop user agent means that you don't have touch capabilities, which again is crazy because there's a growing number of laptops that have touch screens now. So hopefully this is going to change on the website front, and we're not going to have to do much in the browser to cater for it. But this is slow moving. Question: there are sites such as MDN and Canusi which document exactly which web standards and features are supported by various browsers. Also, some browsers publish their own lists, such as, all right, yeah, I guess that's for Edge, and chromestatus.com. This would be very useful for web developers targeting the Ubuntu browser. Is a separate site planned or getting Oxide added to MDN? I must admit I never thought about it, but that's a very good idea. Our web engine being based on Chromium, I would be tempted to say normally anything that works in Chromium should work in Oxide. That's not always the case. There are some APIs that are not wired up yet, but we support a good number of APIs currently supported by Chromium. But I agree that a separate site would be a very welcome addition. I'm not sure about adding that information to MDN. Well, that would obviously require quite some work together with the folks at Mozilla. That would be an interesting effort. But again, resource constraints, people constraints. At the moment, I don't see the available resources for doing that. But that would be very welcome. So by the way, Aquarius, if you have a list of APIs that you would like to see supported that are currently not supported, please send them my way. We try to do every release of Oxide, we try to enable additional APIs. We recently enabled WebRTC and it seems to be working well, minus modulo some bugs which are known and being worked on. But we know that there are a lot of APIs still to implement. So everything to make PWAs work. Web push. All right. Okay. Okay. I'll make sure to forward that information to the people on the Oxide team. And feel free to do so yourself. Question: tell us about notifications. When will the browser support them? Will it support the newer push notifications? Will background unloaded tabs get push notifications? That's one of the APIs that we still need to implement in Oxide. As far as I can remember, there was some ongoing work for that, but I think it was paused for some reason. So I need to check the status of it. It's basically a matter of enabling it in Oxide first, and then wiring it up in the browser. The details of whether background unloaded tabs would get support for that at the moment are unknown to me. I guess I would need to do some research into that. All right. Are there more questions? Or does it make sense for me to continue with my list of notes of what we achieved convergence-wise? I guess I'll do that until the next question. So we implemented more keyboard shortcuts. I don't have a full list, but we have quite an extensive keyboard shortcut support. So we have specifically stuff like Control plus Shift plus T to undo closing tabs, Control G and Control Shift G to cycle through search results when searching in a page. we're also now using window level shortcuts instead of listening to key events, which allows handling shortcuts better, especially when, for example, the address bar has active focus. Do I remember correctly that there was a branch in development for control 1, control 2, control 3 for switching between tabs? Was it work of yours, Michael? Or
Yeah, that was mine. I was fighting with some, I think, focus scope stuff between the tab bar and the URL bar. And I think some things have changed there recently, and I just need to go back and try my patch again.
yeah, you definitely want to have a look at it again, especially since we switched it to window level shortcuts. It should be much easier to implement and to get it right. So your patch is going to be very welcome if you can take another look at it.
All right, cool, thanks.
Some other things we do is that we now detect the input devices that are connected. So, for example, when opening a new tab, we automatically focus the address bar if there is a physical keyboard connected. You don't want to do that if there's no physical keyboard, because otherwise that would pop up the OSK, and that would cover part of the screen, which has valuable information when opening a new tab, because it has a list of bookmarks and top sites. So being able to detect the physical devices connected allows us to be much more clever about this kind of subtle behavior. Similarly, when there is a mouse connected, we replace the bottom edge swipe gesture with a bottom edge bar, which is always visible and which can be clicked instead of swiped from out of nowhere. And this is really very similar to the bottom edge component in the UI toolkit. For technical reasons, we're not using exactly that component, but it has the same behavior. One thing that we did during that cycle was we added keyboard navigation support to all the existing views. So previously, in the past cycle, or in the cycle before, we had added keyboard navigation only for wide views. That is basically when running on a 10-inch tablet or on a desktop. But the assumption being that you were more likely to plug in a keyboard to that kind of device than to a phone, but it's not a true assumption anymore. So now all narrow views are on par with the wide views. Oh, and something that was implemented recently is touch selection. So previously we had the working selection only with the mouse, and I know it was a big source of frustration for a lot of people, myself included. And it's been long in the coming, but it's finally there. There are some known bugs which are currently being addressed, but for the most part it works. So now touch devices and desktops are on par regarding selection. And that's about it. Obviously, a lot more work went into the browser in the past cycle, but it was not specifically for convergence. So I'm not going to mention it in this session. There's a new question now. The browser doesn't contain an ad blocker, as Opera and Brave do, and doesn't support extensions, so nobody else can build one, as Chrome and Firefox do. So is there any way planned that we can block some ads while using the Ubuntu browser? So I mentioned earlier that this is something I'd like to see in the browser. I had even submitted a Google Summer of Code proposal for that. Basically, what what needs to happen, since we don't plan on supporting extensions, is we need to enable that kind of code in Oxide, expose it as an API, and ensure that the browser uses it. That's the only way forward. And that's really something that I like to do, or to see being done. Unfortunately, we're not going to have it as a Google Summer of Code project this summer, but this is still something I'd like to mentor if anyone is willing to do the work on that. It's probably a significant amount of work, but it's also, I would say, very interesting. So anyone who feels brave and wants to see the benefits of that in the browser, please step up and ping me. Otherwise, I'll see if I can find some spare time and do it myself. But I don't see that happening in the near future. Privacy tool rather than explicitly an ad blocker. Alan, what do you mean exactly by a privacy tool? I guess that that comprises more stuff than just an ad blocker, but I'm not familiar with the word, with the term. Third-party cookies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which might result in blocking ads. Yeah. Yeah, probably. So I guess that could be part of the same task, really. Privacy badger. Okay. Yeah, I'll have a look at that one. Essentially, as I understand it, we would still need to do some work in Oxide to enable it first, and then use it in the browser. So there's no big difference with the initial task I was proposing. And yeah, ad blocking or privacy tools would be, I think, a good way of differentiating our browser from other browsers on other platforms. Definitely something people would appreciate, I think. Question: when will the browser get tooltips, mouse over stuff? As soon as we get design for it. So we have the API in Oxide. It's been implemented a while ago. So we can now be notified. Oh wait, tooltips. Okay, so it's not. We don't have full support for it in Oxide yet. We have support for being notified when the mouse is over a hyperlink, and we get notified and we get the target URL. So we could display that URL, but I guess you also you also include the tooltips when you mouse over an image, for example. In which case we need to add support for that in Oxide. For the former, support is already there, and we just need to get some input from design on how to display the target URL for the currently hovered link. Sorry. Question: will it ever be possible to use Netflix or Amazon Video on Ubuntu phones, tablets with the browser? There is a bug report for that. Netflix support requires DRM support, which is a proprietary module in Chrome, which, as far as I know, no one has ever managed to get working with Chromium. So we're kind of out of luck there. I mean, if someone manages to get it to work with Chromium, then we could ship the binary and enable it in Oxide. But at the moment, we just don't know how to do that. and since it's proprietary code, it's hard to reverse engineer. Question, is a new tab a new process? So not necessarily. We have a pool of renderer processes, basically. And that works exactly like Chromium in that regard. Okay, 5 minutes left in the session. So if you inspect the running processes when you have the browser open with a few tabs, you're going to see a number of Oxide renderer processes, which most likely correspond to one tab each. But there is also in Oxide a single process mode, which I think we discussed in the past, we might want to use for web apps. And in that specific case, we would be using only one renderer process for all tabs or overlays in the web application. Okay, 5 minutes left. So I wanted to mention quickly a list of things that are upcoming with regards to convergence. So the next big thing is multiple window support. As I mentioned earlier, support for that landed in Unity 8 and Mir. So it's now a matter of using that support in the browser, and I'm going to start very soon work on that. Something we are looking into is adaptive scroll bars. So currently we get mobile scroll bars on touch devices and desktop scroll bars, which can be dragged with the mouse on desktop. But there is a wrong assumption on what is a desktop and what is a touch device in Oxide, which we need to fix. Because, as you know, when you connect a touch device to an external monitor, it should probably behave like a desktop. But currently, you're still going to get the touch scroll bars. The current assumption, by the way, in Oxide is that an Android kernel plus EGL is a phone or a tablet. So we need to get rid of that assumption and to be more clever about it. And we also need to figure out how to dynamically change the scroll bars, which is not an easy problem. Another thing we want to enable in Oxide is printing support. We don't really know what needs to be done yet. We haven't done much research into it. And one thing I want to do in the browser, for which we need some design, is enable search in the history view when in narrow mode. Currently, there is search in the history view in wide mode, but not in narrow mode. And that makes the history view really not as useful as it should be. And I think that's it. Lots of discussions happening in the RC channel. Once Hangouts work, Hangouts already work, Michael. Modulo the known bugs, but it definitely works both on desktop and touch devices. Oh, okay. You want me to update that PPA? We'll do that. All right. So I'm out of topics for discussion. If there's no more questions, I think we can call that a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for all the good questions. That made for a very interesting session. And as I said earlier, I'm available on IRC. I monitor quite closely the Ubuntu phone mailing list. So if you feel like contributing to the browser or to Oxide, there is a lot of work to be done still. So contributions very welcome, and I'll try to help as much as I can. All right. Good. Goodbye, folks.
Thanks, everyone.